So just by way of introduction, hi everybody, Eric here. I'm a director at Tenstorrent, and Tenstorrent's a startup based in Toronto that designs and produces microprocessors tailored for machine learning workloads. And we've been in business for about 5 years. We actually just had our 5-year anniversary last week, and we're starting to make some waves in the high-performance AI compute space. So Tenstorrent's a new sponsor for TMLS, and thank Dave and his team for enabling this and allowing us to talk to you today. Just a reminder that I am full screen, so I can't see any questions right now, but I'll address them towards the end. I'm just going to check very quickly that my mic is on. Alex has said, hi, Eric, so I assume you guys can hear me. That's good. So I imagine if you've attended this conference, you've heard of Moore's Law at the very least, but in case you haven't, very quick summary. Gordon Moore was a famous former UC Berkeley prof who founded a company called Intel in the 60s, and he famously stated that the number of transistors in a microprocessor will double every 2 years thanks to transistor shrinkage. So within the same space, you'll be able to get more transistors, which effectively increases the speed at which processors run. And I think that at this stage, that's pretty much common knowledge. And at the same time, you probably heard of the last 10 years that Moore's Law is reaching its plateau, or it's dying, or it's even dead. This guy said it. This is the CEO of NVIDIA. This guy said it, which is interesting and relevant because he is a UC Berkeley prof and a senior Google engineer. And I was taught it in my undergrad 15 years ago, back when baggy jeans and the Red Hot Chili Peppers were still cool. I think they're still cool. But not everybody agrees. So this guy here is Jim Keller. He's an industry veteran with 40 plus years of experience. He's a pretty smart guy and in a position to know what he's talking about. And he wrote the x86 instruction set. He designed the Apple A4 chip. If you ever had an iPhone 4, you used one of his chips. He was the lead engineer for the Tesla autonomous vehicle chip. And up until very recently, he was SVP of engineering at Intel. Interestingly, though, he's now my boss. So here's the alternate title for my presentation. Career Limiting Moves 101, Contradicting Your Rockstar CTO. You know, the thing is, though, he's probably right, especially regarding Moore's Law, and you should trust him over me. Not just saying that because I like my job, which I do, but he's been designing computers since before I was born, and he's got stats to show the processors still increasing, you know, in performance at a relatively predictable and consistent rate over time. In fact, he's done a video during his time at Intel where he makes a fairly compelling argument around this, which we can talk about, and I can share in a link later. The trouble is, in AI, it actually doesn't matter. So looking at this graph, I appreciate it might be a little bit hard to see in your screens here, but on the vertical axis, we have an exponential, and this is petaflops per second, days. And this here is a time axis. We have a gradient along here, which is the doubling, the Moore's Law. And we have this much steeper gradient right here, which is the compute demands of AI models. So what we're seeing is the computational demands of machine learning are increasing exponentially. Sure, so is the processing speed, but the exponential curve on compute demand is much bigger than the increase of processor efficiencies. So we're on a fast track here to computational demand seriously outpacing supply. And in fact, it's already happening. So GPT-3, the third generic pre-trained transformer, which is probably still state of the art, is probably, if I look here, it's probably up here somewhere. One of our partners, Lambda Labs, produced research that showed that training GPT-3 on a single NVIDIA A100 instance would take somewhere in the region of 350 years at a cost of $5 million. So this is clearly not democratizable. This is not something that, you know, the citizen machine learning engineer could go out and train themselves. So as an industry, we need to think about novel ways to deal with demanding workloads that are coming our way. And so this is what my team at Tenstorrent is working on. We've built technology which features hardware acceleration of machine learning processes, features like dynamic sparsification, conditional execution, early exits. And what I'm going to do to articulate how some of these features are speeding up that process, I'm going to look at dynamic sparsity briefly. So for those who are not maths and science graduates, you might not be familiar with sparsity. So let me just give a quick background here. This is a picture of a dog. I drew this dog just to prove that's true. I actually have the original right here. Coincidentally, this picture is also my response to any questions I might get around why I don't have an arts degree. So we're looking at this dog drawn in binary. I think you can just about see it if you squint. So in a typical AI process, you take blocks of this image and you iterate over the image, and you do feature detection for pre-assigned lines and shapes. You iterate across the entire image, and you get a score, a classification, a probability that maps to a label. So within the neural network, this is represented by a matrix multiplication of various weights and measures, or weights and activations. So essentially what that looks like is, if I come over here, this is multiplied by this, plus this, multiplied by this, and it iterates through the entire graph, and then it goes across this, plus this, multiplied by this, and at the end, you get a result, a probability. Now, the trouble with this is, as these dimensions grow, the volume of computation increases exponentially along with it, right? So, I mean, I talked about computer vision in 30 seconds, but this means that as the volume of training data increases, the volume of computation will increase exponentially. New nodes, new weights means more matrix multiplications. And so this is a decent chunk of why we're seeing exponential growth in model processing time. Bigger models simply take longer. So going back to that dog again, you might have noticed there was a ton of white space in that image. You might even say it's kind of sparse. So here's my sparse dog. So would it make more sense to ignore the white space that obviously isn't part of the dog image? Just focus on the edges, focus on the lines. I mean, if 95, 99% plus of your processing time is spent looking at white space, isn't that a huge waste of time and money? So, yep, good point. Let me run this quick video. I like this as an explanation of how this goes. We learned in school that any multiplication where a factor is 0, the result is 0, right? So that's a super easy sum for us to do no matter what the other side of the factor is. Trouble is, computers don't have that intuition. They're going to naively perform all of the jobs you gave it, whether or not it's actually contributing to the result set. So wouldn't it be cool if we could proactively eliminate the calculations that aren't going to contribute to our result? I think so, and this is essentially what we're doing in sparsification. By taking advantage of the sparsity, we can lower the volume of computation dramatically. And if you combine that with high-performant hardware, you can get substantial increases in improvement. It's actually possible to prune out large portions of a graph without impacting accuracy, which is an obvious concern, in any significant way. We're talking, less than 1–2%, right, difference. And there's plenty of white papers Google to independently verify this. It's pretty well studied, so I encourage you to do so. And I think the results speak for themselves here. I mean, this was a kind of a silly example, but the same broad theory applies to color images, natural language, recommender systems. Pretty much anything that can be represented by a neural net will have some properties of sparsity that we can leverage. So we took this thinking into our chip architecture, and we designed a chip that can dynamically induce sparsity in both training and inferencing modes at runtime. And as I said, the results speak for themselves here. I'll leave this slide up for a couple of seconds so you can look through the performance per dollar advantages here. And I'll just call out that we're running at 1/4 of the power and a 13th of the cost of this market leader, which is a comparable chip in terms of performance, right? Beyond that, we wanted to make something that was actually useful to the ML community. Like, there are other organizations who have tackled this problem, developed proprietary frameworks to be able to do this. Our approach is, rather than developing a proprietary framework, it'd be better to go where the winds are heading, and it would be easiest to adopt on ultimately if it works with ML frameworks that the community is already familiar with. So we developed our own native graph compiler for PyTorch and for Onyx, meaning that right out of the box, your existing models will run without refactoring. And we can run other frameworks as well, like TensorFlow, Keras, through an Onyx compilation path. And over time, we're working to provide native support for other ML frameworks like TensorFlow and others. Okay, so this is a quick peek under the hood. I'll note that being good at map models isn't the whole story. I mean, we've got big memory arrays on chip. So each of these yellow blocks here is a gigabyte of DDR4 RAM. Each of these blue T's is what we call our 10.6 core, and this is what's inside a 10.6 core. We've got a megabyte of SRAM per core, 5 RISC-V cores per core, and this is a 10 by 12 array of 10.6 cores. So that's a lot of compute power. This sits on a PCIe card, which is a standard PCI Gen 4 card, which would slot into a standard motherboard. What else? I mean, the architecture allows for things like early exits. So if you want to stop inferencing after the model reaches a certain threshold of confidence, you could do that. Or if you wanted to do, assign a model to a specific set of cores and set another model to a different set of cores, you could do that too. And actually, that's quite handy when you're embedding these chips into things like vehicles and robots and potentially POS terminals and other places. And because we take a packet view of the world, we can also accept variable sequence and tensor lengths, so you're not padding out tokens, which is all pretty cool features, I think, for the ML community. And the other thing we think about, so it's really a fundamental part of our design, is scaling can be a significant issue, right? It would be really cool, I think, to be able to train a model in the data center and use that same trained model on the same architecture in an embedded edge situation, right? Without having to worry about things like cross-compilation. So we designed our chips to work at any scale from the workstation all the way through the server to the data center. Our current generation Grayskull, it fits straight into a standard desktop or server rack, as I mentioned. The next generation Wormhole, it's coming down the pipe very soon. It's actually in our labs being tested, incorporates Ethernet on chip. So you can network thousands of these chips together in a data center where it's all treated like one contiguous parallel processor. The other nice aspect about designing specifically for the ML community is that we're not bundling more than the community needs. Buying a GPU, you might be paying for a lot of technology that you would never use, like graphic processing features, for instance, right? Our technology costs about 1/10 of the cost of a high-end GPU marketed for machine learning purposes and is as performant. So I'm coming to the end here, but I'm going to defer from lecturing you on the latest and greatest ML models in finance because we've got lots of really strong presentations from my speaking counterparts. Lots of great things already said today. So what I will say is that I've been chatting with a few banking AI leaders recently, and the story is pretty consistent. They say, yes, we're using AI operationally for things like AML, SEI, fraud detection stuff. We're using it for credit scoring, sentiment analysis for customer experience enhancement, this kind of a thing. Oh, capital markets might be using it, but they're on the other side of the fence. We don't really know what they're up to. It's pretty consistent across the board. And honestly, that's pretty cool. It's a lot more than what's happening even 10 years ago. But big transformer models are really picking up steam and taking off fast. And the idea here is that when a practitioner such as yourselves maybe produces a GPT-3 scale model for banking, maybe something, I don't know, that uses Reddit data to predict unstable short positions, for instance. We saw that a few weeks ago. Well, congratulations. you're going to be rich, and also banks are going to demand a lot more processing power. So we're hoping that the real innovation here will be driven by the users of our chip. Someone maybe will train an embedded model for raw transactional data as a form of feature engineering or something. Meanwhile, we'll be really focused on providing the most efficient, usable ML processing technology possible to make your job easier and allow you to do more interesting stuff. So that's it. I'll be in the booth all morning to answer questions. And if you have any deep tech questions, we've got Drago, who's one of our tech leads from the engineering team, joining us at the booth at 12:30. If you're job hunting, Jessica will be around today as well. She's our HR colleague. Barbara's in the booth as well all day. She's our marketing manager. And if you have any questions and the booth isn't your speed, I'm happy to take an email or swap notes over LinkedIn. My email address is eduffy@tenstorrent.com. And you'll probably be able to find me on LinkedIn just by searching Eric Duffy. So yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day. I will go small screen now and look at the questions that have come up. Doesn't look like we have any questions just now, but I'll be kicking around if anybody wants to ask anything. I'm going to leave it there then, and I will be around if anybody has any questions. Thanks very much, folks, and catch you later.